Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important updates are coming from the United States of America, where the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, entered the White House. That was very interesting procedure, inauguration process. I believe that everybody saw this event. There were lots of interesting statements made by different politicals, lots of interesting details, pictures, and many other things, and of course very upset Joe Biden. Donald Trump made lots of very interesting statements, so let's discuss the most important of them. Trump will declare a national emergency at the southern border. Furthermore, according to information we have, he is also going to send troopers with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to allow the illegal migration. Furthermore, and the most important, is that Trump to sign executive order banning aid to other countries if it conflicts with U.S. strategic interest. When talking about this order, most likely we are talking about Ukraine, and this is very bad piece of news for the Ukrainians. Furthermore, Trump will reinstate the death penalty at the federal level. Another important thing, that he will pardon 1,500 people involved in the Capitol riot, and many other interesting things. And the most important detail, that Trump finished his inaugural address, he did not mention Russia or Ukraine even once. And this is another very good piece of news for Russia, and very bad piece of news for Zelensky and for Ukraine itself. Now let's move to Europe, and we got very interesting statement that was made by President of France, Emmanuel Macron. He made his own speech. He talked with his people, and he stated that French President Emmanuel Macron delivered his annual address to the country's armed forces, stressing that the fighting in Ukraine will not end anytime soon. He called on the army to prepare for possible conflicts that could be closer to the front line. The war will not end tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and this conflict is not at the end. So that was stated by Macron. I'll remind you that according to information we have, the United States of America most likely will sign some agreements with Russia, or will do everything they can with Russia, let's say, to escape and to quit this conflict in Ukraine. And most likely France, Germany, and the United Kingdom are going to be responsible for the next stage of the special military operation. But the Russian military experts are saying that if Russia will be forced to face just Europe without the United States of America, of course, it's not going to be easy, but it's not a big problem for the Russians. At least this information was stated by different pro-Russian military experts. When talking about Ukraine, of course, Zelensky was insulted many times. For example, Zelensky, after the inaugural process, stated that there is nothing to see there, and in general, there are more important things to do. According to information we have, Zelensky tried to ask to be invited for inauguration process several times, but every single time he got just refusal. And according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, Zelensky congratulated Trump on his inauguration 2 times. So the first time was probably in his social networks, and the next time he congratulated him during this evening speech. So we see that he's very angry, he is nervous, and he is trying to force Trump to see him and to mention him or something like this. Okay, now let's discuss, let's move to the situation on the ground, and let's discuss everything in details. During the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, we got lots of very interesting updates from the Surovikin direction. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how the forces of the 47th Mechanized Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine was repelling another Russian attempt to attack in the direction of the settlement by the name of Nikolsky. The Russians were using dozens of tanks, hundreds of soldiers. From the video that was published by the 47th Mechanized Brigade, it's very difficult to understand whether the Russians managed to achieve at least anything, but the Russians are saying, and based on the geolocations, the Russians managed to enter the settlement of Nikolsky, and now the Russians are trying to advance in the northern direction. So once again, the Russians were attacking using these roads of attack, and when they entered the settlement of Nikolsky, starting on the 21st of January, the Russians are moving along the village of Nikolsky in the northern direction with the purpose to attack the Ukrainians in Viktorovka from the south. Furthermore, we expect that the Russians most likely will try to cross the river of Malaya Loknya, then to take under control over the railways, and even to move further in the eastern direction with the purpose to cut the Ukrainians on the territory of Malaya Loknya and Koldron. This victory in the village of Nikoyska is very important. Most likely the Ukrainians will carry out several counterattacks with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to force the Russians to fall back. And if the Russians are able to repel every single upcoming attack, then we can start counting days for the north and Suja direction. Furthermore, we have adjusted the map in the area of the village of Staraya Sorochina. I'll remind you that several days ago, when the Russians began their offensive, we got geolocations from this part of the village. The Ukrainian tank was attacking the edge Russian positions, and based on that video, we have adjusted this part of the settlement of Staraya Sorochina in Russian favor. But now on the 21st of January, we got the video how the Russians were attacking Ukrainian forces, which means that Ukrainians most likely managed to restore control over this territory. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the village of Agranom. The Russian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of this settlement. I'll remind you that this territory, according to different sources that we got somewhere in the end of December of 2024, reported that the village was captured was captured by the Russians or restored control by the Russians completely. But now we start receiving additional updates of how the Russians were bombing this territory. So most likely, as a result of counter-offensive operation during the January, the Ukrainians managed to restore control not just over the settlement of Agranom, but also over the southern part of Makhnovka. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupyansk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. This morning of Ukrainian time, we got lots of updates from different mappers like pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the southern part of the settlement of Dvorichna. Once again, this information was confirmed by every single source, pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian and neutral, but without any geolocation that can confirm this. Anyway, based on these reports, we have adjusted the map in the southern part of Dvorichna. So, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 20th of January. This is the situation by the beginning of the 21st of January. The Russians managed to take significant territories. Now, most likely, the Russians will regroup themselves. They will bring additional forces, and then they will be able to advance further in the southwestern direction with the purpose to outflank the city of Kupyansk. In the northern direction, we have another video. The Russian sources published the video of how they were tossed flamethrowering the Ukrainian edge positions in the forest to the north of the settlement of Dvorichna, and this video tells us that most likely the Russians are planning to advance in this direction as well, with the purpose to improve their positions or maybe to cut the tier 24-14 roads and not allow the Ukrainians to bring additional reinforcements in the northern part of Dvorichna with the stabilization purposes. Now let's move further. And let's discuss the situation in the Chasiv Yar direction. During the previous night, we got lots of very important updates, and as you can see, we have adjustments on map. The pro-Russian resources confirmed that as a result of clashes during the previous 24 hours, the Russians indeed managed to establish complete control over the northern part of the city of Chasiv Yar. We're not adjusting anything because yesterday we have already adjusted this territory in the contested area based on the report published by neutral resources. The most important video is coming from the forest in the southern part, in the eastern part of the city of Chasiv Yar. In this video, we can see how the Russian general or responsible for this direction was controlling the Russian offensive operation in this area. He was giving additional orders to the soldiers on the ground how to act in this or that direction. And in this video, we can see how the Russian stormtroopers were attacking a building, the building in the side of this forest on the territory of the Ogniuporis facilities. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map and we have colored this part of forest, including buildings in this area, in Russian favor. And this is the strongest, one of the most powerful stronghold that used to be under Ukraine control. Now this territory, as we can see, was captured and secured by the Russians, and currently the Ukrainians don't have any other temporary long-term deployment or stronghold points, and most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back in the direction of the micro district of Shevchenko in the very near future, in coming hours maybe even. As for the city of Toretsk, yet nothing from this area that can confirm 100% control over the territory. the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, and probably for the first time since the beginning of the battle for Dvorichna and Kotlina, we haven't received anything that can confirm additional progress on the ground. Just different sources confirmed the progress that the Russians managed to achieve during the previous 24 hours. Probably the Russians are regrouping right now after the fall of Kotlina. There are lots of job to do for the Russians. They need to regroup, bring additional forces, evacuate wounded, and then the Russians most likely will continue advancing further in the northern or the northwestern directions. As for the Kurakhove area, the Russians once again changed their FPV drone focus. This focus used to be located in the vicinity of this intersection of roads during the battle for Velyka Novosilka, but when the Russians finished the battle for Velyka Novosilka, I'm talking about the encirclement and so on, the Russians moved their FPV drone focus back in the area of Constantinople, Andreevka and Ulakli. Now the Russians are flying in this area and destroying everything that Ukrainians sent in this direction. The thing is that the Russians are about to begin the final battle for the settlement of Dvorichna, for the settlement of Ulakli, and many other different small villages in this area. So now that's why they need to have drones in this area with the purpose to destroy everything that Ukrainians can send with the purpose to counterattack or to stabilize the situation. In this video we can see several FPV drone attacks in Ukrainian vehicles that were abandoned by the Ukrainians during the battle for this territory, another cemetery for the Western weapon, and so on. So the Russians are about to begin their major and final offensive in this area with the purpose most likely to cut this Dvorichna pocket. As for the settlement of Velyka Novosilka, from this area we got several important things. First, we got the video of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the southern part of the settlement. Based on this video, we can make a conclusion that the Russians most likely are planning to begin, let's say, to attack the southern part and to cut some pocket in this area. As you can see, there is a pocket. And furthermore, we got the video that was published by the 110th Mechanized Brigade. This is the core. This brigade, 110th, and the Presidential Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine are the core brigades of defense. And there are lots of territory defense forces. The sources are saying that Ukrainians decided to evacuate the Presidential Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and they decided to leave, to abandon 110th with the purpose to hold as long as possible positions inside of the village. And of course, the Ukrainians are suffering losses, and today the Ukrainians published the video about the situation on the ground, that they are very angry, very upset, and they are very angry that they were abandoned by their commanders. And they're saying that they are tired to see how Ukrainians are having fun in Kiev while they are forced to die along the line of combat contact. And as for the changes on the ground, just a small advance was, let's say, published by pro-Ukrainian sources. According to them, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the eastern part of the town of Velyka Novosilka, and as you can see, the pro-Ukrainian sources expanded the gray zone significantly. When talking about territories under complete Ukrainian control, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, they control just 30% of the settlement. Another 60% of the settlement is in the gray zone, and the Russians control just 10%. So the situation is very difficult, and the battle is coming to an end, obviously. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.